All right, everyone, we finally got an Ebola death in Goma, which is a city of 2 million people in Congo. It has an international airport, and it's unfortunately right on the border of Rwanda. You see, it's like, if you look at a map of San Diego, it's pressed right up against the Mexican border. And so there's another city on the other side, and it's semi-porous, or was in the past. It's sort of like one city in two countries. That's how Goma is with Rwanda. There's a fairly large town on the other side as well. So they're thinking, could easily get into Rwanda now. It's been in Uganda already. So now it's a potential three-country outbreak, just like the West African epidemic. That's number one. That's a problem. Number two, when it was in Butembo, you had a city of, 500,000 people, about Boston-sized, and it was already, sort of taking hold there. They haven't managed to contain it. There are still new cases, although they've kept it linear. It's the number of new cases isn't skyrocketing, at least. Now it's in a city that's much more large and dense. If it takes hold in Goma, it's the worst of all possible scenarios, especially because there's air travel to other fairly large African cities in the region. It could easily spread now across international borders, which in Butembo, the only main uplink was to Goma. Well, it's made that step now to a city 150 miles away. Again, very, very close to several international borders anyway. Now, of course, we're talking about the Goma International Airport. We're talking about one about the size of the Burlington Airport here in Vermont. Not exactly JFK or Heathrow. But it does have uplinks to places like Cairo. It does have uplinks to places like, Axum probably has an international airport. I'm sure it connects to Lagos. Probably connects to South Africa, like Johannesburg, the Pretoria region. It probably connects further to places in the Middle East, I would think. So yeah, this could be a problem now, couldn't it? Whoops. Yeah, and the WHO finally declares it an international health emergency. Wow! I told you should do that 2 months ago when it hit Butembo. But then they waited and they said, oh, don't worry, everyone. We've got it under control. Yeah, our aid workers are fleeing because they get shot at because there's a civil war going on. Yeah, it's hit a large urban, dense population where it's now taken hold. Yeah, it crosses over into Uganda. Yawn, who cares? Now it's in Goma. Oh my God, everyone freak out. It's an international airport. We need to take steps. You should have already been taking steps. Did you even deploy the experimental vaccine in Goma before this happened? Or did you just fucking decide to wait and see how it works? Dear Christ. And there have been situations where entire groups of aid workers have left the country entirely. They're like, we can't operate under these conditions. The government won't give us enough troops to keep us safe. On like half a dozen occasions, you've had Ebola wards being attacked. If you set up a ward in Goma, is it going to get burned to the ground? Are people going to go in and start looting? Because you get high-level medical equipment in a situation like that, a mob will come and storm the building and steal that and sell it on the black market. You've got impoverished urban populations that don't understand the basic concept of sanitation in many cases, people with third, fourth grade educations. No offense, but the educational and health structures in places in Central Africa tends to be subpar. If they don't know the danger of Ebola because there's been no wide-reaching educational campaign, or because it's ignored, that's the worst possible scenario. The worst thing is that like 50 years ago when you first had, significant Ebola outbreaks, and you've had more that you haven't heard of, and that's been said too, like half of all outbreaks probably were never recorded. 50 years ago, the population density and the transport between places in Africa was a lot less. There were a lot less people in Africa, in the region where Ebola is endemic. That's number one. Number two, most of these places, like the urban centers, they didn't have international airports. They didn't really have an uplink to anything outside of the region. You had to go to a place like Lagos, a really, really big city, in order to find air travel, in order to find anything significant. So if Ebola broke out, it was slow to travel, more easily quarantined. It tended to be affecting populations where the density simply was lower, and so transference from person to person would be more difficult. The population of Central and West Africa has exploded, causing a situation where at any given time, by random chance, one person eats bushmeat, gets Ebola, it happens to mutate just right and wipes out 500 million people. And it won't stay just in Africa. People act like, well, it's in Africa, who cares? In this day and age, if it gets to a city, as it has now, of enough means, it can travel anywhere in the world. Ebola can now infect anything in the continent of Africa within 24 hours. Doesn't that make you feel safe? What if it gets to Cairo or a place that's considerably bigger than Goma? Cairo, Lagos, Johannesburg, a place like that. What if it gets to anything? What if it gets to a Khartoum or some place like that, or a Tripoli? Big problem then. And get to Europe probably. Now in the first world, they might say, well, density being lower in most outlying areas, and we've got good medical apparatus and stuff. Look, if you can't contain it there, can you imagine if you had a couple Ebola cases in Rome or something, it'd panic all the Europeans. All the Europeans would begin panicking and start breaking economies down. People would be terrified. They'd act like it was the next plague. Even if it doesn't take hold, the fact that people are panicked can cause its own problems. And when you have a panicked population and an epidemic breaking out at the same time, all hell can break loose. Containment, what's that? Now, the fact that you have more sanitation in Europe than you do in, Central Africa is not going to save you. Ebola doesn't give a fuck. Especially if it manages to mutate. If it goes airborne, it's game over for anyone that gets it until it mutates again, which could be a billion cases later. It can kill off a significant proportion of the world's population. It wouldn't just be African people dying. In fact, once it hits higher density locations outside of Africa, it'd burn through them faster. Imagine if it hits a place like Manhattan or London. Imagine if it hits the lower class dense neighborhoods of London's projects or something like that. Because you have so much travel to and from the Middle East where most of the people who reside there are from. Saudi Arabia, they go to Riyadh or they go to Tripoli or something like that. They go to visit their relatives in Libya or Somalia or something. Be a big problem. It's a ticking time bomb. I've been warning of it for months, but nobody really gave a shit. Now it hits a major city. Now people care. They cared a little bit when it hit Butembo, but they were like, oh, but don't worry, the WHO will handle it. Medicine Sans Frontier will handle it. No, they won't, and they didn't. Now, they played doctor, they played experimental mad scientist and deployed vaccines that barely work, apparently, and serums that kind of sort of reduce the death rate by like 5% or 10% or some terribly piddling little number. Better than nothing. I mean, yeah, it helps. The whole human race won't die because we've got one treatment that kind of sort of works. What if it mutates and it escapes? What if it mutates again? And the vaccine stops working at all and it goes exponential again? Is it going to take you another 6 months to develop the next one? Yeah, 10 million people died and there are 5 million active infections across the entire fucking world. But don't worry, we're developing another vaccine. Might even have a 20% success rate. Wow, in clinical studies. 8 months from now we'll be ready to deploy it, everyone. Don't worry. First worlders would start breaking into the science lab to get a hold of the experimental serum. It'd be a bit like when you go to the institute to get the modified FEV virus. Fuck this shit. Fuck the robotic security that they probably have in Groom Lake. People storm that too. Yeah, storming Area 51, they'll be like, yeah, I'm gonna die anyway. It's just a matter of whether I get the Red Death or get shot by the Men in Black. So, I think getting shot's probably quicker, right? It's less painful. Yay, aliens! Hey, Lamau. It'd be funny. Poor people. And I feel really sorry for the people in the Congo because it's like the world just sits by and does nothing while thousands of people are getting infected and dying. They don't even care. Until it hits an international airport-enabled city, now all of a sudden it's our problem. Now people care about those Central Africans. They didn't even know there was an active Ebola epidemic before half the time. You knew, if you're a subscriber to this channel, you knew that Butembo had been hit. Did the CNN viewers know? No, they didn't know that it was even. They don't even know. They can't find Congo on a map. They like to pretend that they're erudite and elite. They couldn't even find Congo on a map. They have no idea where Rwanda is. They don't know where Goma is. They couldn't put a pin on a map and show you where it is. I can. Some of you can. I bet the average MSNBC or Fox viewer can't. Can Tucker Carlson? Is he smarter than a 6th grader in geography? Probably not. That's about all. Peace out.